Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope you're all doing well. So I'm going to continue with the sets of five from this translation of the Digha Nikaya number 33, Samgiti Sutta. And this is a translation, I believe, by Bhikkhu Bodhi as well as Maurice Walsh. So let me get started. These are sets of five things perfectly proclaimed. Five aggregates: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, consciousness. Five aggregates of grasping. That's the Panch Upadana Khandha. It's the same: body, feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. So as we understand the five aggregates, that is to say form, rupa, and that has to do with the four great elements. And we already understand that the understanding of four great elements in ancient India corresponds with the states of matter as we understand it in modern science, that make up the different components of the body in different ways: solid, liquid, air, and fire or plasma. And feelings are essentially in relation to Vedana, Vedana being an experience of the five physical senses or the mind. And these are sensations upon which there is a pleasant experience, a unpleasant experience, or a neutral experience. And the understanding of that experience being pleasant, unpleasant, or neutral is perception. But perception goes deeper than that. Perception also deals with the memory of the mind in terms of what one has learned in the past. So as soon as you see something or you see someone, you have a certain perception about that person or thing based on your previous memories of them. And mental formations really are in relation to sankhara, and that is the abhisankhara, the sankharas that are karmic in nature, sankharas that are influenced and conditioned by ignorance. And these are fettered formations, which is to say that they have craving, conceit, and ignorance in them. Consciousness here is really cognition, or the bare awareness of an experience, whether it is a sensory experience or mental experience. Now, going back to formations, when the mind is free of all the taints, then the five aggregates are still present, but the formations there are going to be arising because of contact. So contact always gives rise to the formations, no matter if it is influenced by ignorance or not. But this time the formations will be seen as impersonal, seen as impermanent, and seen as not worth holding on to. So these five aggregates also correspond with the mentality and materiality, with nama rupa. Materiality with form. You have contact also with form, because contact can only arise dependent upon the six sense bases, which are also made up of form, which are made up of some kind of matter. Now, the feeling, perception, formations, and consciousness correspond to the mentality, the factors of mentality as well. So contact with the form or the body, feeling with the feeling aggregate, perception with the perception aggregate, intention with the formations aggregate, and attention with the consciousness aggregate. So intention here is in relation to you making contact with something, meaning the six sense basis makes contact with something. It arouses some kind of formation, and that formation can give rise to some kind of intention. If that intention is fettered by craving, meaning the formations that give rise to that intention are fettered by craving and hindered by ignorance, it will then correspond to some action that can lead to craving, clinging, and being. But if the intention is something that is seen as impersonal, then the formations that arise won't give rise to the potentials for craving, clinging, and being. Consciousness or cognition is corresponding to attention. At the level of contact, when you have the form and the eye, for example, when the photons bounce off the form and hit the receptors in the eye, it creates or it manifests the eye consciousness. And this eye consciousness is rarely attention. It's only when you see something and pay attention to it is there contact. It's not just bare sensory impact, but it also has to have that attention present. So if any of these processes in mentality, materiality, or the five aggregates have clinging to them, have the nature of clinging or subject to clinging, that is where the problem is. That is what needs to be understood. And what is that clinging? This clinging or this upadana is essentially related to the desire or craving or clinging that arises in relation to any of these five aggregates. That happens when you think of any of these five aggregates as permanent and any of these experiences of the five aggregates as being personal. As soon as you identify with them, then there is a possibility for further craving and a possibility for further clinging and so on. So what needs to be understood is the impersonal nature of all the five aggregates and the impersonal nature of all the links of dependent origination up until feeling, because it's at the process of feeling when you see it as it really is, which is arising because of causes and conditions, and therefore impermanent. You let go of any identification with it and see it as personal, and therefore it will not cause further craving or suffering. Then there are the five strands of sense desire: a sight seen by the eye, a sound heard by the ear, a smell smelled by the nose, a flavor tasted by the tongue, a tangible object felt by the body as being desirable, attractive, nice, charming, associated with lust and arousing passion. So this is in relation to craving. Craving arises dependent upon the experience of the six sense bases. But here it's in relation to the physical craving arising dependent upon the five physical senses. So as we just discussed earlier, with regards to the aggregates, if you take the feeling as personal, if you identify with it, then you will take that feeling as I, me, myself. Take it as I am this feeling. And when you do that, you experience the pleasure in that feeling, and you take that pleasure in that feeling as yourself. Or you take that pain in the feeling as yourself, or the neutral feeling as yourself. In all cases, there is the potential for craving to arise from that. So these five strands of sense desire are so called because they are dependent upon the eye seeing something that is pleasurable, on the ear hearing something that is pleasurable, the nose smelling something pleasurable, the taste buds enjoying something that is of scrumptious flavor, the body feeling something that is pleasurable to its skin or to the body in total. So if you notice this and you let go using the 6R process, then these senses and the experience that's happening dependent upon these senses won't provide any craving, won't provide any pain or inherent suffering, because you don't cause yourself to identify with them. 5 post-mortem destinies: hell, animal rebirth, the realm of hungry ghosts, human, and the Deva world. So these 5 destinations, you have the hell realms, you have the animal realm, you have the hungry ghost realm, you have the human realm, and you have the Deva realms. These are the 5 realms that make up the Kamma dhatu, that is to say, the sphere of sensual pleasures or sensual experiences. In these realms, there is the potential to experience pain or pleasure depending upon what realm it is. The hell realm has basically the rebirth into a hell realm is dependent specifically to the impurity of hatred. If one acts out of hatred and habitually acts out of hatred, habitually has violence towards others in speech and especially in action, if one keeps grudges, if one abuses another through words or through actions, and of course, if one kills habitually and kills even one time, in fact, the assured destination of hell in the next rebirth is dependent upon 5 different actions. And the 5 different actions that are factors for this is intentionally killing one's own mother or father, an arahant, drawing the blood of a Buddha, or getting in the way of a Buddha, as we've seen with another person in another sutta, where they didn't give way to the Buddha, and immediately they were drawn into the Avicii hell. Or the somebody creating a schism in the Sangha. These are 5 requisites for immediate rebirth, meaning the very next rebirth will be in hell. And these are all dependent upon hatred, all dependent upon aversion and ill will. The animal rebirth is dependent upon specifically the mental impurity of ignorance or delusion. It's where the mind indulges in all kinds of sensual pleasures and basically dulls the mind. It's where the mind will crave for all kinds of sensual pleasures, intoxicants, drugs, alcohol, sex, food, and so on. And because of that, mind becomes animalistic in nature. And such a mind, it also has wrong view. Just like a person destined for the hell realms will have wrong view as well. The realm of the hungry ghosts is dependent upon the craving mindset, the greed mindset. That is to say, someone who is always craving for things and acts out of that craving, acts out of jealousy, acts out of grudges, acts out of stinginess. If somebody is not generous with their smile, generous with their words, generous with their kindness, doesn't express kindness, doesn't keep the precepts, and so on, they're liable to be born into the hungry ghost realms. If one causes pain to another, or through one's words causes pain to another, one is subject to the realm of the hungry ghosts. So in the hell realms and in the animal realms, there's very little one can do. In fact, it's only when the karma is exhausted and there is some good karma available that there's potential for rebirth in a higher realm or back to the human realm. In the case of the hungry ghosts, they have very little recourse except for relatives from past lives dedicating merit to them, or dedicating merit in general. So being generous, sharing with the monastic community, and basically being kind and loving and compassionate and so on, and dedicating that merit to all beings, the relatives who are in the ghost realms will basically have that merit, and that adds to their good karma. So in that sense, they have that potential of coming out of that realm. And of course, when that karma of the health of the hungry ghost realm is exhausted, they will take rebirth in the higher realm. So before I get into the human realm, the Deva realm has different kinds of levels. It's very diverse, just like the animal realm in terms of the kinds of beings that are there. But essentially, the way to the Deva realms is to maintain the precepts, is to be generous, is to be kind, is to create situations of harmony, is to resolve conflicts, is to share with the community at large and for the welfare of society. It's to always be truthful, to always see how you can share your resources with others for their benefit. Of course, serving and helping the monastic community in any way you can. And essentially, there is no meditation practice that leads to the Deva world. It is more primarily related to the world of the Brahmas and so on. But with the Deva world, it's basically the different realms where the Devas experience the pleasure. I mean, they are essentially enjoying all kinds of sensual pleasures. So there's very little recourse for them to really learn the Dhamma. Majority of them will be more interested in just having fun and a good time there, and then are liable to come back to the human realm, or in case they are able to help others in their process of following the Dhamma, then they make good merit in that way. And they make good Kamma, and that adds to that storage, that storehouse of Kamma for them. So they can then just keep manifesting, keep having rebirth in the Deva realms. But as we see, all of these realms are conditioned and they are impermanent. And so they will have inherent dukkha in them. They don't lead to nibbana, and they don't lead to the end of karma and rebirth. And then the human realm is the most special realm, because in the human realm, you have both pleasure and pain. But the human realm gives you the ability, especially now where we are at this point in time, and being able to be around the time of the Buddha's dispensation, where his influence is still there. We have the suttas here, we have the teachings, we have the techniques, we have the knowledge and the ability to apply that knowledge and transform it into wisdom. So the rarity of a human life is just immeasurable in that sense. And the ability for one to be in a human life in a world system where a Buddha has taken rebirth is also just completely unfathomable. So it's important to understand that. And if someone really understood that, they would keep their precepts, obviously, but more importantly, they would dedicate their time and their efforts as much as possible to meditation, as much as possible to attaining nibbana, because it is a very precious thing. And uh, the disadvantage with the lower realms is that there's only pain there. There's only suffering there. There's not a lot of recourse to do something good. Whereas in the Deva realms, there's a lot of pleasures and there's a lot of distractions. And so no one is really interested that much in letting go of those pleasures. But in the human realm, there's a bit of a balance, even though it seems like a lot of lives are different measurements of good and bad and pleasurable and painful. But ultimately, this is the time in the human realm to really take advantage of, follow the Dhamma, cultivate the path, and attain nibbana and full awakening. So these are the 5 different destinations. 5 kinds of begrudging. So begrudging, I think we should understand the Pali of this, which is macharya or macharyani. And that really doesn't mean like holding a grudge or begrudging someone in that sense, but it's more about stinginess. It's not sharing. It's not being of a generous mindset. And so 5 kinds of stinginess as to one's dwelling place, as to one's house, or as to one's shelter. Families, gains, beauty, and Dhamma. The families here can be in the lay understanding one's relatives, stinginess in terms of sharing the goodness with one's relatives, or in the sense of the Sangha, sharing with the Dhamma community at large, the family of Dhamma followers and Dhamma practitioners. The gains is in relation to, of course, monetary gains or other resources, but also gains in terms of one's own merit, uh, being able to share that with another person, whatever resources that they have. Beauty, I would not say that's the right translation, because vana here can be from the Sanskrit varna, which is status, one's place in society, so to speak. So using the influence that one has in society for uh, the development of one's path and development of the Dhamma for others. And the Dhamma itself, being stingy with the Dhamma, that seems like an oxymoron, because why would you want to be stingy with the Dhamma? If you really understood the Dhamma and if you really practiced the Dhamma, you would want to be generous all the time. And you would be open to sharing the Dhamma to those who are interested and those who ask questions. It wouldn't make sense to hold on to that and keep that like some secret jewel not to be shared with others. 5 hindrances: sensuality, ill will, sloth and torpor, worry and flurry or restlessness, and skeptical doubt. So we already understand these hindrances when they arise in jhana practice, in our meditation practice. Whenever these hindrances arise, we know what to do with it is to use right effort, is to use the 6 R's. Recognize that there is a hindrance present. Let go of that hindrance by releasing your attention away from that and relaxing the mind and the body, or just the mind, if one is in the formless realm, for example, and letting go of that craving, experiencing joy in the form of the smile. So coming back to the smile and returning to one's object of meditation, and thus coming back into jhana. You know you are in jhana whenever none of these hindrances are present. If a hindrance is present, then you are no longer in jhana. And this is a good opportunity to explain how this 6 R's, in that sense, are also fulfilling the 4 Noble Truths. You can look at it in your jhana practice, in your meditation practice, as here is a hindrance. That is the first noble truth of dukkha, that this hindrance is present. You have recognized it. You release your attention away from it and you relax it. By relaxing the tension, you abandon the second noble truth of tanha. Whatever arises in the way of identifying with the hindrance, trying to push it away, trying to do something with it, you abandon that. Relax the tension. Then you experience nirodha, which is in that relaxed step, you have this tranquility of mind, this mundane nibbana, which is the cessation of dukkha, the cessation of suffering. So you experience for that time being the third noble truth. And then you return to your object and you repeat that process whenever you need to. And that process is an encapsulation of the entire path. So by every time you apply the 6 R's, you are essentially fulfilling the 4th noble truth of the path of Magga. The 5 lower fetters: personality belief, that is Sakkaya Ditthi, doubt, attachment to rites and rituals, sensuality, and ill will. So we understand this also, but briefly, personality belief, or Sakkaya Ditthi, is the belief in a personal self. It's the idea that there is some kind of self present, whether it's in the body or it is the body, or whether it's one of the 5 aggregates or it is within the 5 aggregates, and so on. You let go of the idea of a personality, let go of the idea of a permanent, all-pervading personality on an intellectual level when you enter the stream. So when you become a Sotapanna, you let go of that. You let go of doubt in the practice because you have seen it for yourself. You have respect and reverence because of that. You have conviction and faith in the Buddha, in the Dhamma, and in the Sangha. And so you make the effort to continue, and there is no longer any doubt. Attachment to rites and rituals really is attachment to the idea that something other than the path will lead you to Nibbana. But now that you have seen it for yourself and attained Nibbana and attained stream entry, you let go of any attachments to that. By letting go of the first 3 fetters, you completely close off the destinations of the hell realm, the animal realm, and the hungry ghost realm. So a stream enter can only take rebirth in a realm, in the human realm, or higher than that. Then sensuality and ill will, so that is really craving and aversion, craving to sensual desires, craving to sensual experiences and pleasures and so on, and having aversion towards any kind of sensual or mental experience. In the case of a Sakadagami, they have very minimum of this, and they might notice it and immediately use the 6R process to let that go. In the case of the Anagami, they don't have that present at all. They have completely eradicated the fetter of craving and ill will. 5 higher fetters: craving for the world of form, that is Rupa Raga, craving for the formless realm, or Arupa Raga, conceit, or mana, restlessness, and ignorance. So when you destroy these 5 fetters, you become an arahant. Now, this craving for the world or form, the craving for the formless realm, and the restlessness are actually dependent upon the mana, dependent upon the conceit, because there is an I am present in the world of form in the sense of the form jhanas, in the sense of the rupa jhanas. There's an attachment there. So even for the anagami, they still have conceit present, and there is the sense of I am practicing, I am in this jhana. The craving for the formless realm is in relation to the ayatanas, the arupa jhanas, that is to say, infinite space, infinite consciousness, nothingness, and neither perception and non-perception. So these are dependent again on the I am, on that sense of conceit, on that fetter of conceit. The restlessness also is dependent upon conceit because there is this agitation that happens in the mind that one identifies with. You will notice that in the meditation, at some point in the beginning, the mind is sort of like still moving around in some places before it actually starts to become collected. In the case of the arahat, there is no movement of mind. And a more extreme form of that restlessness would be actual agitation of the mind, which is dependent upon this I am, that there's something going on with this sense of me. But when you let go of conceit, that is to say, let go of complete identification with the five aggregates and the six sense bases, you cut off that underlying tendency towards conceit, cut off that fetter, then the craving for the rupa jhana, the craving for the arupa jhana, and the restlessness go. When you see this process of the Four Noble Truths in every moment, when you have that experience of the Four Noble Truths in all of the links of dependent origination, when they arise post cessation, and you see all of this as an impersonal process, you understand the Four Noble Truths in completely, which means you have completely understood the first noble truth of suffering. You've completely abandoned all sorts of craving, including craving for existence and craving for non-existence. You have completely let go of the bhava, the bhavatana. You have let go of the taint or the defilement of being. You have let go completely of that ignorance because you have abandoned that craving. Abandoning the second noble truth of craving, you have come to the realization and the experience of nirodha, of cessation of suffering. By doing so, and how you've done so rather, is through the noble eightfold path. Through following the path completely and developing and cultivating it, you have fulfilled the parameters of the Four Noble Truths, and therefore there is no more ignorance present. 5 rules of training: refraining from taking life, taking what is not given, sexual misconduct, lying speech, strong drink, and sloth-producing drugs. So this we understand to be taking of the 5 precepts, which is to say that every time you take the 5 precepts, you are following these rules of training, which is to refrain from these things. 5 impossible things an arahat is incapable of: deliberately taking the life of a living being, taking what is not given so as to constitute theft, sexual intercourse, telling a deliberate lie, storing up goods for sensual indulgence, as he once did formerly in the household life. So these are the 5 things an arahat is incapable of doing. 5 kinds of loss: loss of relatives, wealth, health, morality, and right view, or view in this case. No beings fall into an evil state, a hell state, after death because of loss of relatives, wealth, or health. But beings do fall into such states by loss of morality and right view. So as we understand, when we lose the possessions that we have in this life, when we lose relatives or parents or siblings or any family member or friends, or we lose in our health, there is that loss, but it is nothing compared to falling into a state where we don't have morality and we have wrong view, because that leads to the lower realms. 5 kinds of gains: gain of relatives, wealth, health, morality, and right view. No beings arise in a happy heavenly state after death because of the gain of relatives, wealth, or health. But beings are reborn in such states because of gains in morality and right view. So, in other words, in this life, when we have a new family member in the form of a birth, when we have new relationships arise through different connections, new friendships built, when we have new wealth gained and better health and so on, that's all wonderful. That's a wonderful aspect of life. But ultimately, it is impermanent and dependent upon causes and conditions. So they are liable to fade away at some point or another. But having the right view, having stream entry, and establishing the right view, understanding it, and developing one's morality, it helps one to gain greater things. Ultimately, having stream entry, having that morality and right view, means that you have a one-way ticket to full awakening, to arahantship. And that is worth more than anything in samsara. It's the one-way ticket out of samsara. 5 dangers to the immoral through lapsing from morality. So this is in Sutta 16, verse 1.23. I'm going to go to that now. I have this bookmark. Let me make sure I have the right one. Let's see. Hmm. Okay, here we go. Then the Blessed One addressed the lay followers of Pataligama. Householders, there are these 5 perils to one of bad morality, of failure in morality. What are they? In the first place, oh, this is in reference to what I just said. Hold on, let me make sure I got this right. Let me go to the Sutta manually. Okay, there we go. Okay, got it. Then the Lord addressed the lay followers of Pataligama. Okay, that's the one. Householders, there are these 5 perils to one of bad morality, of failure in morality. What are they? In the first place, he suffers great loss of property through neglecting his affairs. In the second place, he gets a bad reputation for immorality and misconduct. In the third place, whatever assembly he approaches, whether of Katyas, Brahmins, householders, or ascetics, he does so diffidently and shyly. In the fourth place, he dies confused. So, in other words, by a failure to have morality and having one of bad morality, it can cause a detriment to one's reputation. It can cause great loss in one's wealth. It can cause this sense of shame in society. And of course, confusion, which is to say one is of wrong view, and it could lead one to a bad destination. And then it, like it says, in the fifth place, after death, at the breaking up of the body, he arises in an evil state, a bad fate, and suffering and hell. These are the 5 perils to one of bad morality. And householders, there are these 5 advantages to one of good morality and of success in morality. What are they? In the first place, through careful attention to his affairs, he gains much wealth. In the second place, he gains a good reputation for morality and good conduct. In the third place, whatever assembly he approaches, whether of Khatyas, Brahmins, householders, or ascetics, he does so with confidence and assurance. In the fourth place, he dies unconfused. In the fifth place, after death, at the breaking up of the body, he arises in a good place, a heavenly world. These are the 5 advantages to one of good morality and of success in morality. So I'm going to go back. Yeah. So those are the 5 disadvantages or dangers and the 5 benefits. 5 points to be borne in mind by a monk wishing to rebuke another. I will speak at the proper time, not the wrong time. I will state the truth, not what is false. I will speak gently, not roughly. I will speak for his good, not for his harm. I will speak with love in my heart, not with enmity. So this is not just for monastics, but it can be for anybody. If they feel like they want to approach somebody in a conversation about something, they have to consider these 5 things. And the acronym of THINK will probably be a good mnemonic device for that. THINK, think before speaking, which is to say, is it timely? T, is it timely or not? H, is it honest or dishonest? I, what is the intention in what you're going to say, in terms of your intention to cause harm or your intention to uplift a person, or your intention, whatever your intention is. And is it necessary for the benefit of the people involved that you're going to talk to? And K, is what you're going to say be imbued with loving kindness, with kindness? Are the words you're going to be speaking going to be rooted in kindness, going to be rooted in gentleness? 5 factors of endeavors. Here, a monk has faith, trusting in the enlightenment of Tathagat. Thus, this blessed Lord is an arahant, a fully enlightened Buddha. So there is conviction, there is faith, not only in the Tathagat, in the Buddha, but in the Dhamma and in the Sangha. They have good health, suffer little distress or sickness, have good digestion that is neither too cool nor too hot, but of a middling temperature suitable for exertion. So taking care of oneself in terms of making sure one is in good health whenever one practices meditation. Whenever one makes the effort to practice meditation, one has to take into account these things. Are you in a healthy state of body? Is the body tired, or is it energetic? Is it restless? Is the food you eat, you have eaten, is that causing any kind of distress in the body, or is it suitable for you to eat for the purposes of having a mind and body that is at ease? Is the temperature in your room good? Is it cool, or is it too hot? Whatever works for you, whatever is suitable. And he is not fraudulent or deceitful, showing himself as he really is to his teachers or to the wise among his companions in the holy life. That is to say, being upfront with whatever it is in terms of, for example, when you go on retreat, being obviously truthful and honest and upfront of whatever it is that you're experiencing, so that the teacher can provide you the relevant information that is required for you to apply, so that you can make changes to your practice. So you're upfront with that. You're not holding on to anything, or you're not withholding anything in order, for whatever reason it might be. Just be open, upfront, and honest. Keeps his energy constantly stirred up for abandoning wholesome states and arousing keeps his energy constantly stirred up for abandoning unwholesome states and arousing wholesome states, and is steadfast, firm in advancing, and persisting in wholesome states. So these are the 4 right efforts. And these are also the 6 R's. Basically, keeps his energy stirred up for abandoning unwholesome states. How do you abandon that? You basically prevent any arisen wholesome states from arising by recognizing whatever it is. You release your attention away from it. You relax and abandon the unwholesome state. You smile, so you're generating joy, you're generating a wholesome state, and then you maintain that. So you persist in that wholesome state by returning to your object of meditation. He is one endowed of wisdom, endowed with wisdom concerning rising and cessation, with the Aryan penetration that leads to the complete destruction of suffering. So that is to say, one is endowed with the understanding of impermanence, the understanding of dukkha, and the understanding of the impersonal nature of reality. So endowed with this wisdom that leads one to completely letting go of all conditioned reality, and thereby attaining nibbana and letting go of any identification of the process thereafter, leads one to the destruction of all the taints and the fetters, and thereby attaining arahantship. The five pure abodes, aviha, unworried, clearly visible, clear-sighted, and pureless. So the five pure abodes are associated with the realm of, or the plane of existence of the anagami. So when one lets go of the sensual craving and the aversion or ill will fetters, then they completely let go of the five lower fetters. Once they do that, they become an anagami. And if they don't progress into arahantship in that same life, then they will take rebirth in one of these five pure lands, in one of these five pure abodes. And they are associated with the faculties. So that's another understanding of the five pure abodes. So aviha, unworried, clearly visible, clear-sighted, and pureless. These are the five. And aviha has to do with the understanding of okay, I just slipped there. It's the understanding of the energy, the understanding of collectedness, of mindfulness, and of wisdom. So there's the fifth one that I'm missing. If someone can help me out with that, if they know it. But essentially, those are the states that are associated with these five pure abodes. Five kinds of non-returner: the less than half-timer, the more than half-timer, the gainer without exertion, the gainer with exertion, he who goes upstream to the highest. So in other words, when one goes to the realms of the non-returner, the less than half-timer essentially takes rebirth and immediately will enter arahantship, or less than half the time of having been there, they will attain arahantship. Or they will have spend more time than half and then attain arahantship. The gainer without exertion, which is they don't make any exertion and they just let go, and there is the entry into arahantship. The gainer with exertion, making the effort and then attaining arahantship. He who goes upstream to the highest. So this is one who goes through the different realms of the pure abodes and attains arahantship in that way. And so now, going back to the abodes, we have faith, energy, mindfulness, collectedness, and wisdom. Thank you very much for that. So essentially, that means that the aviha is related to faith, that is conviction in the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. The energy or the effort that one makes, that is related to the realm of the unworried. Mindfulness with clearly visible, collectedness with clear-sighted, and wisdom or insight with the peerless. Thank you for that. 5 mental blockages. Here a monk has doubts and hesitations about the teacher, is dissatisfied and cannot settle in his mind. Thus his mind is not inclined towards ardor, devotion, persistence, and effort. He has doubt and he has doubt and hesitations about the Dhamma, about the Sangha, about training. He is angry and displeased with his fellows in the holy life. He feels depressed and negative towards them. Thus, his mind is not inclined towards ardor, devotion, persistence, and effort. So essentially, one needs to have some form of an open mind towards the Buddha, the Dhamma, and the Sangha. You have to have that faith that is generated by having that open mind before you continue on the path. If you have any kind of doubt, that is going to lead nowhere. He is angry and displeased with his fellows in the holy life. He feels depressed and negative towards them. So there's no reason to do that. That can arise out of jealousy, that can arise out of some kind of contempt, arise by some kind of one-upmanship or whatever it might be. And for whatever reason, then that mind will not progress because of that. So you have to have and cultivate loving kindness. You have to cultivate compassion, cultivate mudita. When somebody else attains a jhana, it is a time to be happy and celebrate that. When somebody has an attainment, it is a wonderful thing, and it is a time to celebrate and be happy for that person. In doing so, you are developing mudita. So this is the way you let go of these things. First is to have the open mind in the beginning of the practice. And when you see that you develop the conviction in the practice, in the Buddha, in the Sangha, you cultivate loving kindness, you cultivate compassion and mudita. And of course, you make the effort, you incline your mind. And so then you have the ardor, devotion, persistence, and effort. 5 mental bondages. Here, a monk has not got rid of the passion, desire, love, thirst, fever, craving for sensual desires. Thus, his mind is not inclined towards ardor, persistence, and effort. He has craving for the body, for physical objects, for having eaten as much as his belly will hold, he abandons himself to the pleasure of lying down, of contact, of sloth and torpor. Or he practices the holy life for the sake of becoming a member of some body of devas, thinking, by means of these rites or this discipline, this austerity, or this holy life, I shall become one of the devas, great or small. Thus, his mind is not inclined towards ardor, devotion, persistence, and effort. So, in other words, you're talking about craving for sensual desires. If you continue to indulge in that, you're not going to be able to understand the path, understand the Dhamma. You have to look at it and let it go through the 6R process. For the body, for physical objects, again, the pleasures that arise from the body, identifying with the body, identifying with contact with physical objects, all of this one lets go of identifying with, lets go of the craving for it. Let's go of the taste for food. Just eat whatever is suitable for your needs, and that's enough. If you eat too much, you'll find that the body becomes lax, it becomes tired, and you want to take a nap in the afternoon. And because of that, there arises sloth and torpor. So be controlled in how you eat, be controlled in what you eat, and you have to experiment and see what works best for you. But essentially, you want to prevent sloth and torpor from arising. He practices the holy life for the sake of becoming a member of some body of devas. So this is the wrong kind of thinking. The idea is not to just be a member of a sangha or to be part of the monastic community or to practice this because you want to just attain the Brahma realms or the Deva realms or whatever it might be. The intention here should be full awakening. The intention here should be nibbana. 5 faculties, the faculty of eye, ear, nose, tongue, body. 5 more faculties, pleasant bodily feeling, pain, gladness, sadness, indifferent feeling. 5 more faculties, faith, energy, mindfulness, concentration, and wisdom. 5 elements making for deliverance. Here, when a monk considers sense desires, his mind does not leap forward and take satisfaction in them, fix on them, or make free with them. But when he considers renunciation, it does leap forward, takes satisfaction in it, fix on it, and make free with it. And he gets this thought well set, well developed, well raised up, well freed and disconnected from sense desires. And thus he is freed from the corruptions. the vexations and fevers that arise from sense desires, and he does not feel that sensual feeling. This is called the deliverance from sense desires. And the same applies to ill will, cruelty, forms, and personality. So let's break that down. 5 elements making for deliverance. Here, one considers the sense desires, or the ill will, or the cruelty, or forms, or personality. And his mind does not leap forward and take satisfaction in them, fix on them, or make free with them. So, in other words, he does not identify with them. He doesn't identify with the sense desire, identify with the ill will, identify with the cruelty, identify with any kind of form, or with, in that sense, the body, or with the personality, the sense of self. He lets go of identifying with that, lets go of that conceit or that I am. And he does, but when he considers renunciation, so renunciation here is nekama. Nekama essentially is renouncing any sense of identification or connection with the sensual pleasures, connection with the 5 aggregates, connection with the sense of personality, connection with any kind of mental state that arises, just completely disidentifying with it, but specifically its sensual pleasures in that context, because renunciation is part of right intention. That is that nekama. So when it does leap forward, whatever it is, the sense experience or whatever it might be, and the mind leaps forward to it and takes satisfaction in it, so it enjoys it, it has the experience, understands it, fixes on it, and then makes free with it. And he gets this thought well set, well developed, well raised up, well freed, and disconnected from sense desires. So if you have the intention of renouncing, the intention of renunciation, then even while enjoying or even while experiencing that, you notice it, use the 6 R's, and disidentify with that process. By disconnecting with that and disidentifying, you then are freed from the corruptions, freed from vexations and fevers. So when it comes to ill will, when it comes to aversion, you replace that with loving kindness. When it comes to the cruelty, you replace that with compassion. When it comes to identifying with forms, understanding it with wisdom, seeing the impermanence of that, seeing the impersonal nature of that, and not holding on to it. And the same with personality or personality view. Whenever you identify with some sense of feeling or perception or cognition or intention, notice that and use the 6R process to let it go. 5 bases of deliverance. Here, the teacher or a respected fellow disciple teaches a monk Dhamma. And as he receives the teaching, he gains a grasp of both the spirit and the letter of the teaching. At this, joy arises in him, and from this joy, delight. And by this delight, his senses are calmed. He feels happiness. As a result, and with this happiness, his mind is established. So in other words, when you have the teaching, when somebody teaches you the practice, somebody teaches you meditation or the jhana practice, the 6R process, you understand it. You go back to the suttas, you understand the letter of the teaching, as well as the practicalities, the spirit of that, and how to apply it, the meaning behind it, informed by the practice. And as you keep doing that, there is this joy that arises, which is the pamoja, this experience of you're really enjoying this process. You see some kind of development happening. You see some kind of improvement happening, and you take delight in that. And from there arises that piti, that joy, that rapture. And from there, the tranquility arises, which is to say, you have a tranquilizing of formations where you're no longer identified with the senses, because you see how this Dhamma can lead you away from identifying with the senses and lead to an experience of the jhanas in which you have the joy, in which you have the rapture, you have the sukha and that happiness and that tranquility. With that sukha, the mind becomes collected, and so the mind is established. He has not heard it thus, but in the course of teaching Dhamma to others, he has learned it. by heart as he has heard it. So somebody who is teaching the Dhamma teaches themselves. Take the case of Kamaka in the Kamaka Sutta. Just briefly put, in that sutta, he says that he is not an arahant, and that's the reason why is because he understands that there is still conceit present in him. But then as he teaches the Dhamma and as he's giving the discourse on the five aggregates, and letting go of the underlying tendency to conceit for them, he becomes an arahant. He frees his mind completely, as well as the minds of others. Or as he is chanting the Dhamma, which is to say, chanting the Pali text, or whatever it might be, one then experiences these different factors, the faith and so on, the joy, the tranquility and the happiness and the collectedness. Or when he applies his mind to the Dhamma, thinks and ponders over it and focuses attention on it. So in other words, when you think about certain concepts of the Dhamma and you reflect on them to the point that it doesn't cause you restlessness. So that's important to note. You can continue to reflect and analyze till the mind becomes very restless, but there's no point in doing that. But just understand it in terms of your intuition, applying the mind to a concept and then waiting for the mind to see how it understands that concept instead of actively thinking about it and identifying with that thinking process. And so the mind collects its attention around that and has some kind of insight. Or when he has properly grasped some concentration sign or a samadhi nimittam, that is to say, the object of meditation, has well considered it, applied his mind to it, so using the process of samadhi, and has well penetrated it with wisdom, seen it in terms of the understanding of impermanence, dukkha, and impersonal nature. At this, joy arises in him, and from this joy, delight. By this joy, his senses are calmed. He feels happiness as a result, and with this happiness, his mind is established. Five perceptions making for maturity of liberation: the perception of impermanence, of suffering in impermanence, of impersonality in suffering, of abandoning, and of dispassion. So these five perceptions arise actually at the level of infinite consciousness. When you see the arising and passing away of consciousness, you are seeing right there and then impermanence. When you start to see it and it starts to get tiresome, you're seeing it right there and then dukkha, and the suffering and the pain of seeing this. When you see that there is no controller here, you see that that dukkha also is impersonal, that there is no underlying self in this process. Because of that, you completely abandon it and you come to this level of equanimity, which leads to dispassion that you experience later on through the process of the eighth jhana and so on. So this can also happen when you're just reflecting or just seeing the arising and passing away of feeling, of sensations, arising and passing away of any of the five aggregates. You notice it, you observe it, you don't think about it or reflect it. You notice it in the moment as it arises and passes away. By doing so, you get a deep understanding of impermanence and you understand that there's no worth in holding on to it, and you see the dukkha. And seeing that, you then understand that there is no self present in any of the five aggregates. And so you see the impersonal nature of conditioned reality. Because of that, you abandon any craving for it, abandon any identification with it. And there arises this dispassion for it. From that dispassion, then comes that liberation, that understanding, that Nibbana experience, and then the understanding that there was a Nibbana experience. And so there is a review process where one sees, if one becomes an arahant, that the taints are completely destroyed and what had to be done has been done. Where it is destroyed, there is no more being. These are the sets of five things which were perfectly proclaimed by the Blessed One. Does anybody have any questions or comments?
Yes, if I may, you said that if there is no hindrance present, one is in jhana. Could that mean that a worldling always has some form of hindrance present because they don't experience jhanas? So they have hindrances basically 24/7.
In some form or another, yeah, they would have it. They have a mind that is either having some kind of desire for something, some craving for existence, craving for sensual pleasures. They might have restlessness present, or they might have sloth and torpor present. They might have doubt present, or they might just have ill will in the form of annoyance or irritation. So one who is a worldling is always pulled to and fro from these different hindrances. So a person who does attain jhana is free from them for that duration of that jhana. Now, as one starts to become acquainted with the Dhamma and actually starts to cultivate the different perfections, the paramis, like having generosity, having loving kindness, having equanimity, and so on, they start to let go of these hindrances and they start to cultivate a mind that is more suitable for meditation, and then they can experience jhana. So the reason, of course, as you know, the hindrances arise because they don't really take the moral precepts, or they have no real inclination to do so. But as soon as you commit to taking the precepts, you start to have the opportunity to follow those precepts, then the mind gets calmer and calmer and is more prone towards jhana.
Thank you. And maybe as a follow-up question, when does one produce bright Kamma when keeping the precepts? Is that there is a permanent background of wanting to keep them, or is it only produced when there is a decision to be made that entails either breaking or keeping the precept? Is it like a permanent thing, or only when choices and intention come into play, so to speak?
Yeah, that's the thing about the Kamma, because it can arise where as soon as you make the intention, there is that good Kamma, there is that wholesome state of mind. But also by taking the choice and making the choice of applying the precepts, meaning maintaining them, also produces the good Kamma, the bright Kamma. So it can be the same, and the effect of that can be seen at another point in time. It can happen right immediately, or it can happen at a subsequent time. So it can't be said exactly when and whether it's permanent or not, because Kamma itself is impermanent, as you know. So you will feel the effects of it in some way or another, whether it's just a uplifted mind throughout the day, or if you deepen your practice, a mind that is prone towards jhana.
Thank you.
Hi, Delson. It's a little bit follow-up to Sal's questions, like something, like is there must be a linkage between the three poisons and these hindrances. So yeah, three poisons as a anger, central. I only know in Pali, Lobha, Dodha, and Moha, right?
Right.
So
right.
most of the time, as a normal person, it's like we are living in with the delusions. So which is like you can my understanding is like that can be translating to uh, uh, sloth and torpor and restlessness as a equivalent of the delusion's mind. How can I translate that, right?
You're on the right track. Continue.
Okay. I think that's all I can go for now.
Well, let's explore it. Think about it. Reflect
Yeah.
on it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Right.
So you're saying now sloth and torpor and doubt
Yeah,
is in relation to delusion, right? What about
delusion.
the other two now?
The other two, of course, is you're wanting, right? Like that would be the loba. It's the greed and the aversions. It's relate to to it. But as you practice, what I'm trying to clarify in my mind is, as you practice more and more, at least the other two poisons are very noticeable. You can get it, but however, this delusions is harder to because like you unless the mindfulness come in and rescue it, it's hard to notice. So, but when you are mindful, then you are not so much of a jhana. You are not in the jhana, but although you can experience that these are not really present, or can you say that in that time you are absolutely in, like maybe in first jhana or so, right? Like it's just you notice yourself, like you don't have this three poison present in you.
So since you were making that connection, I'll just clarify for everyone so that they understand. So delusion isn't related to that sloth and torpor and doubt, as you said. The greed, which is the loba, I think that's the one that you're referring to. So that is the sensual craving, the craving and the restlessness that's present there. Then the hatred, which is doha or dosa, which is the ill will, the aversion. So the craving, meaning the wanting of that, is related to the greed, and the restlessness is related to the greed. But the ill will is rooted in hatred, is rooted in that anger and hatred. So that's the understanding. Now, to the extent that somebody who hasn't practiced or who has no knowledge of this, they're always in some way or another rooted in one of these three. And how do you identify when you are, let's say, in delusion or the mind is in delusion? It is definitely using mindfulness, and it's definitely understanding it through the attention rooted in reality. So coming back to seeing everything that is conditioned as impermanent. So any experience, like right now, as I am speaking to you, you're hearing my voice. That is impermanent. Every moment of that is impermanent. It gives rise to another moment, and so on and so forth. It is dependent upon different causes and conditions. First, my formations to express, or there's an intention to speak, then that gives rise to the interpretation in the mind, and then the actual speech. Then that gives rise to you hearing it and how you interpret it, and so on and so forth. You're starting to break down the process in that way. You have to use attention rooted in reality to see it that way and not hold on to anything. This is very important, so that dukkha aspect arises when someone holds on to it, when someone identifies it, when someone has that sense of atta, that sense of not understanding anatta. So in anything that is happening, just observe it without any attachment, observe it without any projection. When you do that, then there won't be any delusion present, because that observation is true mindfulness. It's a very simple and effective and easy mindfulness. So you make the intention to just watch things as they are without any involvement.
Thank you.
That's all. I have a question.
Yes.
I'm not having a question how long Sariputta took to deliver the sutta. I think it was a long time. My question is about the personality view that is laid off as part of the first three fetters, and the difference between the conceit, which is laid off at a final fruition. Could you explain the difference between the two?
Yeah. So one is actually an intellectual understanding, and the other is the experiential understanding. Just to put it simply, now on that, I will say that the personality view, or the belief in a personal self, is basically taking any of these 5 aggregates as self, or identifying with any of them as a personal self. There are in total the 20 different kinds of personal self view, which is the 5 aggregates divided by the 4 kinds of view. So there is the understanding that they're equated with the 5 aggregates, that the 5 aggregates are within them, or they arise from the 5 aggregates, or they are separate from the 5 aggregates. There's that sense of self. But this is eradicated, especially when you start to see the impersonal nature of things in the 6th jhana, in infinite consciousness, seeing the impersonal nature. When you have the Nibbana experience, you realize that there was no self that experienced it. In fact, you had that Nirodha experience, the cessation of complete identity, cessation of suffering in that Nirodha experience. And then when it came up, the experience of post-cessation, you saw that there was no self there. It just all arose, and a self was superimposed by the mind that identifies. So from there, you have the understanding that there is no underlying self. There's no cosmic soul or impermanent self there. But because the mind has been habituated to equating things as I and the world, as me and you, as I am and I exist, and so you exist, and so on and so forth. Having this sense of I am better than someone, or I am lower than someone, or I'm equal to someone, all of that is the I am. I am is that conceit. So that conceit comes from the word mana, which is to measure. So even though you know that there is no personal self there, there is this habitual tendency to continue to act in a way that as if you are a self. So even though you have let go of the views that any of the 5 aggregates are self or related to self, there's still behavior there rooted in that kind of thinking, in that kind of understanding. So when you let go of that and you disidentify, no longer identify with any of those processes, then you let go of conceit. You can still use the words like I, me, and mine, and so on, but you're not really going to say it because you actually believe it, in the sense that you experience it in that way. You say it for conventional purposes, in terms of identifying that, my name is so and so to somebody when you're introducing yourself, and so on and so on. But you don't really have any more that belief in that personal self and that experience rooted in that belief in personal self. So coming back to my initial statement with that explanation, the Sakaya Ditti is an intellectual letting go of the intellectual understanding, which means that you no longer can subscribe to the idea of a soul, subscribe to the idea of a permanent self. The other side is experiencing that fully and understanding it, and then letting that go, and then finally acting or behaving in a way that is no longer rooted in that conceit. Does anybody have any other questions?
Hi, Dawson. Just following up on the experiential experience and the intellectual understanding of conceit, I would like to understand further. Is it like possibly on a not on a meditation level, that in human, that in the journey of life or searching or full experiences, that there is the course level on insights of the three characteristics, which is not on a momentarily level, but on a understanding level, that we can see there is a lot of people that have been possibly going through different journeys, that they have kind of that possible, but it's not a continuous. So it's not a continuous lifted of that conceit, as you has explained, that habitual the habitual internal inbuilt conceit is always working with our like inheritance. So I would like you to explain a little bit, like if certain, because we have seen a lot of very they were aware or enlightened, or I mean from history, from different like knowledge that pass on, even not from the Buddha stream, but from books, from other peoples that have their insights of understanding that. How does that process for, instead of meditation, I understand our meditation process, correct me if I'm not right, that helps us to move from the causal level to a momentarily level. But how do we see that process going? How do we able to find it in daily life of that understanding into a step of a more able to, because it's so very often we are lost. So
yeah.
In daily
So
life,
you have to understand
in
that,
every day.
yeah. So you have to understand that. Go ahead.
Sorry, yes, please. I'm done. I'm finished with my expression.
So you have to understand that there is this concept of enlightenment or awakening in other traditions, of course. And other traditions talk about this idea of understanding that they are not the ego, they are not the personal self, but then they also identify more often than not with certain kinds of cosmic ideas. Like, in certain traditions, they have the idea of a Brahman, which is basically like a super consciousness that is one and the same with the entire universe. But there's still an idea present that I am one with the universe. Or even if they don't have that idea, they still have some kind of a identification with the process and whatever their practice is. There will still be conceit, and there will still be some kind of understanding of identification with one or more of the five aggregates still present. So the uniqueness of the Dhamma is that it's looking at it from all angles. If you go back to the Brahma's Net Sutra, I think that's DN 1, Digha 1, the Buddha goes through the different types of views that arise dependent on people's experiences. And some people attach to a perception of an experience, some people attach to a feeling of an experience, some people attach to the intention, and so on and so forth. And they create all kinds of views related to that. And these are all the different wrong views because they lead to identifying and they lead to further rebirth, not only in every moment, because they act from that sense of understanding and therefore continue to create habitual patterns, continue to create situations for themselves, instead of letting go and abandoning all views, letting go and abandoning all self-views. So that's one understanding. Secondly, that's just the one fetter, the understanding that the five aggregates are not self, the understanding on the intellectual level. But there's also that doubt, and there's also the attachment to the rites and rituals that have to be let go of, to consider one to be a stream enterer, to be a sotapanna. So in that sense, the path is essentially starting with the faith in the Buddha, faith in the Dhamma, faith in the Sangha. With that openness of mind and saying, let me try this, that faith further develops into conviction, into seeing this as something that can work for yourself. And then when you start looking at the path and realize that this is the path that can lead to Nibbana through your own experience, then that destroys that third fetter of rites and attachment to rites and rituals. The thing about it is stream entry can happen even if you don't have a cessation experience, right? It can happen when you just understand that intellectual seeing of no self present, no permanent self present in any of the five aggregates. But it is steeped, or it is situated, or it is rooted in the experience or practice of the Dhamma, which means you continue to follow the precepts, you continue to have right intention, you continue to have right mindfulness, you continue to meditate, and thereby all of this leads to the fruition of the experience of seeing not self in things, seeing not self in conditioned reality. And how do you do this in daily life? That's the other question that you have. You have to see it as an opportunity in every moment where, let's say, you're conversing with somebody, you're listening to my voice right now. Every moment, have the awareness and the attention. You see this as an impersonal process. Who is listening? Who is the one speaking? Who is the one interpreting? How is this process arising? Is there self present there, or is it happening because causes and conditions? But in that process, don't identify with the thinking and then further analyze and reflect. Rather, just observe with that question in mind and wait for the mind to bring up the answers to you in relation to seeing that this is an impersonal process. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, certainly, yes. Yeah, just the we're taking every chance of like watching again, like observing, not that was the habitual like tendency that we get ourselves in there already while we are in any experience. Now it's the practice of like, again, in the practice of observation that we have to always be able to apply instead of like already like indulged it or get into the situation. Yeah, that gives me a better like practice for daily activities. That's certainly, yeah. My question was to that understanding of that experience of that conceit in there has to, the experience of that conceit that certainly it is experiencing after the activities of the reflection. But during it, if we are able to step back, that means that we are lifting that conceit, like we are slowly moving away from it. Is that what we will be, what we are doing, and what we will be? How does that experiential experience, that is my question, of that conceit being really at not all the time being an arahant, but at certain point of the time that we are able to see it is right there and we are out of there. How can you give an example of how that experience would be in that sense?
Yeah,
I'm not expecting like the whole like. Do you understand my question? Sorry.
Yes, yes, I understand. So that experience of no conceit, you want to know what that feels like. What is the experience like, right? That's basically what you want to know.
Yes.
Okay. So
Yes.
when you have a conversation with somebody, when you are listening to somebody, whatever activity it is, but let's use the example of having a conversation, okay? And when you're conversing with someone, usually what's happening is, in one who has conceit, is that they're not fully listening. Because when the person is speaking, the mind starts to create all kinds of concepts around what is being spoken, and immediately is thinking of a response to what is being said, rather than fully listening. This conceptualization, this process of looking for an answer to what is being said, or looking for a response to what is being said, is where the conceit is rooted in. Meaning, it's where this sense of I am, so I need to project onto this my ideas of what is being said, or I need to respond with my ideas of how I feel about this, or how I think about this. But if there is no conceit, you fully listen without making any kind of judgments, any kind of associations, any kind of proliferation around what is being heard. Now expand that to all experience. Whether you're seeing something, whether you're tasting something, whether you're smelling something, or whether a thought arises in the mind. That thought is not yours. It arose, but there's no further proliferation in that thought. That is the non-proliferation, which is another attribute of Nibbana. So whenever there's no sense of launching into projecting all of these ideas around something, around an experience, that is where there is no conceit. Does that make sense?
Thank you very much. It is, yeah, yes, certainly, yes. Well, thank you, Dawson. Yeah, it gives me a better, better depth into that understanding. Well, thank you very much.
You're welcome. We'll wait a few more seconds, see if anybody has any last questions.
Actually, yes, because this strikes a chord with me, what you just explained to Helen, because I often drop in the mode, so to speak, of seeing things impersonally. But I've noticed that it seems like when there are no thoughts, no proliferation, exactly like you said, present, then in some way it is more difficult for me to grasp what is being said. And I'm not sure why that is or how I should deal with it, because there are no thoughts, no associations, no concepts. I'm just purely listening, but that makes it more difficult to retain what is being said by the other person somehow. And I don't understand why.
So there I would say that one needs to just try to pay more attention to what is being said rather than trying to come up with an answer, trying to pay attention through coming up with an answer. So when there's no projections, there's no associations, there's no thoughts, you're hearing somebody speak, what happens then?
Well, what I'm trying to say is that I just hear the words. It's like the meaning of the words is starting to disappear. So I do hear the words, but there are no associations or concepts. So it makes it harder for me to really understand what is being said, because it starts to change into a flow of words.
Yeah, so there you have to come back to the interpretation of the words and allow the mind to come up with how it responds to it. So it's about not identifying with the thinking process that might arise after listening to the words also. So even while you're listening, if there's nothing going on, give it some time, give it a few moments to a few seconds to just let the mind go back to what was said if you're able to, I mean, it can come to a point where you're listening to the words and you completely forget what the person might have said. But more often than not, you can probably just listen to what they said without adding anything onto it. Just purely listening to the words, waiting for a few moments, and then allowing the mind to come up with the response to whatever it is that is being said. If it's a question or if they're wondering something or whatever it might be. So essentially what happens is, because there's no associations, there's no concepts and things like that, you are actually fully listening. But the difference here is it seems like it's slowed down in terms of what you want to respond with, because there's a little bit of a pause, a little bit of a gap. Whereas if you had associations, you had an answer already when you're listening to what's being said, like even half a second before the person finishes their sentence, you immediately know what you're going to respond with. That's all well and good. But in that process, it causes conceit. It causes the mind to proliferate further. But if you take that pause and stay more aware of that pause and wait for a response to come, because a response will come. It's not like the sound comes and there's nothing there, unless you go into a meditative state and you no longer are listening at all. But you just allow the mind to interpret what's happening on its own, so to speak, and you will get some kind of response to express.
Okay, yes, that makes sense. So it might also be that I just enter into deep of a meditative state, that I'm not really dealing with the other person anymore, but I'm just going into quiet mind or something. Yeah, okay. Thank you. That makes sense. I will work with that. Thank you.
Yeah, that's the same thing I have, same questions I have in my mind. Lately, I noticed that a lot, especially in the Dhamma talk times, trying to listen to the Dhamma talk, but after a while, just can't think about the wording at the meaning and everything at the behind. All you do is hearing it, disappearing it, like it's just that's it. So I guess it's just more and more understanding of why this fetter is very hard to I don't want to say get rid of, but that's what it is. I'm not very pretty.
But you want to definitely get rid of it. I mean, you want to have the cultivated intention of getting rid of it. But it reminds me again, back to the Malunkyaputta Sutta or the Bhaya Sutta. It goes back to that same thing, right? In the hearing, right, there is only the heard. So there's no self or sense of hearer present. So whatever is happening, just in that sense, you need to have, let's say, for lack of a better word, trust in the sense faculties that they will be able to express the way that they're supposed to express. There might be times when you get into a meditative state while you're doing the dishes or you're driving a car or you're on, you're writing an email or whatever it might be, you get into a meditative state and somehow your mind is able to do whatever it needs to do without you having to be there for it to do it. Right? So there's two sides to that. There is the unawareness where everything is on autopilot, but there is the relaxing of control, relaxing of the sense of control and quote unquote trusting in the process and observing. So that observing without the observer, just watching without the involved. I mean, this is getting into some really kind of nuances and subtleties, but I just hope you're able to grasp what is being said here. Essentially, what I'm saying is observing without any involvement really means seeing and experiencing what is being experienced, and that's it. Just having the experience, and that's it. Now, of course, for practical purposes, when it comes to listening to words and things like that, then there is some attention needed where you wait for a response the mind comes up with, and then you express it. So it's always dependent upon the situation. But on a general scope of things, what I'm saying is just the experience and nothing else is where it's void of any conceit.
Thank you.
Hi, Delson. I just have one more question. Regarding the Digha Nikaya, when you mentioned the 62 wrong views, it is just the way I see it. If there is a wrong view, probably, in everyday lives or worldly, there's a lot of wrong view even before practicing the past, and hopefully less after that. But with any wrong view, I think with the mind, when you try to expand it, you're able to recognize the tension that the wrong view can cause because of the hindrance, right? Because when you interact with other people, if you have a wrong view about something, it's usually come up. I'm not sure if I understand, right? It's hard to describe.
No, you're on the right track. No, it makes a lot of sense what you're saying, because going back to the practical aspect of that, when some kind of wrong view arises in the way of identifying with some kind of process, there is still that subtle tension that you can recognize. So that tension is the form of craving or identification or aversion or whatever it might be. Taking something personal there manifests in that kind of tension.
Thank you, Destin.
I didn't want to interrupt. Did you have more to say?
Oh, no. I think that's it. I think that that makes a lot more sense, because a lot of our practice, when we apply it to daily lives, I start to notice, if there is tensions coming up, there must be a sort of self-identification or a sort of wrong view that I have.
Right. Yeah, essentially coming back to the basics of seeing any tension, seeing any kind of discomfort or anything in the way of pain or some kind of symptom that causes the mind to hold on to the experience. So going back to that same explanation before, the experience itself is just the experience. So having any kind of attachment to it, any kind of involvement or personalizing it, is where one needs to see if that's happening. If that's what's happening, where one is saying, okay, this experience is affecting me, or I am experiencing it, instead of seeing it just as an experience, just as a pure experience and nothing more, nothing added to it, nothing taken away from it, just the experience. As soon as you have that I in relation to that experience, then you know that there's conceit present. So identify that, recognize that, let that go.
Thank you.
Let's share some merit.
May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisitions of all kinds of happiness. May being inhabiting space and earth, Devas and Nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha dispensation. Sari, sari.